How's everybody doing tonight? Shout out to Farron Perry. This is where I want to take my career. Not a bad location. Shout out to Jeffrey Johnson. Shout out to Brian 2590. Good evening. CL 3894. What's up? Shout out to Mr. Whitlock. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate the one. That's what was gonna be my next thing. Give me a one. Chris already gave me the one. So you know how we do it. Got any question, IT or cybersecurity? Drop them in the box. You see it up there talking about the 160R2 today, developing a cyber resilient system security engineering approach. That's one of Mr. Whitlock's issues. We should be developing security by design out of the box. Shout out to Aiken for joining me. I appreciate the ones. Shout out to Larry. Thanks for joining me. I don't know about the number one, but I try to put my 2 cents in there. I appreciate everybody for joining me. You see it, NIST 800-161R2, cyber resilient, a system security engineering approach. That's not too bad. It's December 2021. I always check the date. Some of these special publications, be 10 years old. They could still be valid, but I try to do something, within the last 5 years is kind of where I try to be the most. I appreciate the like. Everybody give me a like if you like it. So you see it right there. Once again, this special publication, that's the SP 800-161 version 2, release 1, December 2021, Department of Commerce, the United States of America. Let's go. Everybody know I'm a NIST guy. That's the 20 families from the NIST 800-53. And this at a high level is basically just an architectural design from AWS. And this is the kind of things we're talking about: securing, resiliency, failover, top down. Shout out to Chris. We always talk about the RMF. So the RMF comes from the top risk management framework, and these are the things you put in there to make sure your architecture and your system, once again, is resilient, secure, and from an engineering background. So I think that's what they're kind of pushing with this particular document. So let's define cyber resiliency: the ability to anticipate, withstand, recover from, adapt to adverse conditions, stresses, attacks, or compromise on a system. That includes cyber resources. The definitions can be applied to a variety of entities or systems. You see it right there: system, mechanism, component, or system element. Shared service, common infrastructure, system of systems identified with their mission or business function. When they say common infrastructure, they lean towards the cloud when they say that, right? An organization, a critical infrastructure sector or region. System or system is a critical infrastructure sector of subsectors. The nation, aka the United States, is emerging as a key element in effective strategy for mission assurance, business assurance, operational resiliency. Definition of cyber resiliency is formed by the definition of the term resilience across various communities of interest, as illustrated in the following example. So if we look at this particular diagram I pulled out of the 161, right? You got your risk management framework, flows over to your goals, anticipation, withstand, recover, and adapt. The objectives: understand, prevent, avoid, prepare, continue, constraint, reconstitute, transform, and re-architect. We're going to touch on a little bit there, but that's what we're talking about, resiliency, right? Reconstitute, constrain, re-architect, and right. AWS just went down, right, with their control plane, with their DNS. So where's your design resilience enough to withstand that? And on top of that, was AWS designed what they did for their cloud service? Was that resilience enough? A lot of people seem to went down when that DNS went down. Shout out to Regine. Thanks for joining us. Then once again, the strategic design, structural design principles, approaches, and once again, techniques. Right. And we're going to touch on a little bit of this, today, and just kind of roll through the high level of documents. And usually this is part of your ATO package, authority to operate. Right. This is what your auditor is going to be looking for when they review your package for you to do federal work. Right. What's your resilience, your resiliency? What's your disaster recovery? What's your COOP? If you are attacked, right, DDoS, what do you have inside your architecture to withstand some of that? Once again, we're going to touch on MITRE and TTP attacks from nation states, right? That's part of the resiliency of the design of your architecture. At the top, you see it right there, cyber resiliency in a construct. Talking about the goal, high-level statement supporting the focus, one aspect, anticipation, withstand, recovery. What's your objective? The high-level statement of what systems must achieve in this operational environment throughout this life cycle to meet the stakeholder needs and mission assurance and resilient security. The objectives are more specific than goals. Right, once your objectives are in there, we're going to start getting more to the strategic and the structure. What's your RTO? What's your return on operation? RPO, what's your return point? If you fell over, where are you going? Right, if your office gets hit by airplane, what's your recovery standpoint? That's where your objectives, you see sub-objectives, activities and capabilities. Capabilities action that supports the achievement of your sub objectives. Strategic design, high level that reflects the aspect of your risk management strategy that informs system security engineer practice for your organization, mission, or systems. All right, so we're gonna go back one. So at the top level, once again, what's your strategic goals? Right? A lot of times too, if you got a federal system, they're telling you what your strategic goals are. Right? You can't be down more than 24 hours. You can't lose more than an hour point of your data. Then strategically, are you in the cloud? Are you on prem? How are you doing it? Are you doing Windows, Linux? Are you doing containers? Are you Docker, Kubernetes? Are you all serverless, right? If you're in Lambda, where your cloud infrastructure runs all your infrastructure for you, right? Strategically, once again, what's your principles and what are you trying to do as a company, division, or org inside the government, right? So strategically, once again, what are you trying to comprehend? Shout out to my man Todd. Thanks for joining me. Once again, you got any questions, just drop them in the chat. So once again, that's you meeting with the CIO, the CISO, and really the CTO, right? Because they're going to give you what their vision is from a technical standpoint. GRC is okay. This is your technical design. What's your governance of that? What's your risk of that? What's your mitigating control of that? Are you a STIG or CIS, component? Once again, here's your structural design statement. Captures experience defining the system architecture and design. We just kind of went through some of those. Guide and inform design and implementation decisions throughout the system lifecycle. Highlights different cyber resiliency techniques. Once again, you got failover. Are you failing over inside a data center? right? Are you failing over between data centers, which is um, availability zones inside AWS? Me and Regine had a good conversation about what is an availability zone and what does that mean. Availability zone inside AWS is two data centers about between 125, 150 miles apart. So if one something hits a data center, it won't automatically hit the other. And then those data centers, they usually have different power companies, different water companies, right? So they're resilient. So you can do failover between those data centers inside a region that are 100 miles apart. And usually they're inside AWS or Azure dark fiber. So you failing over in microseconds, right? You're not over the internet, you're failing over on their network, right? So you're dealing in microseconds failover. I appreciate you. Then once again, what are your techniques? We talked a few of those. The technique, process, practicing, providing capabilities. Implementation approach, we talked about operating system, containers, Kubernetes, Docker. Once again, from a GRC perspective, that's really the CTO's vision of how they want to implement that. Right? But once they implement it, right, we need to make sure it has high availability. Once again, it meets the return operations and return point operations for how much data you lose. And that's going to be in, once again, these statements. Solution, a combination of technique, architectural decisions, system engineering processes, and operational process and procedures. Mitigation, an action or practice using technology controls or solution or a set of these that reduces the level of risk association with the threat event or threat scenarios. And we'll talk about some of those threats, right? If you got DDoS, right, from that attack, you probably want to have a web application firewall, right? It takes care of that. It takes care of your level 7 and level 4 DDoS attacks. They also have DDoS solutions inside AWS and Azure. It costs a little more money, but once again, depending on what the data is, the classification, and the risk, lets you know if you need to spend that type of money. But once again, we need these kind of overview documents to figure out, once again, what the level of risk is and what the level of speed you need to bring back the system back up if it goes down. Once again, AWS had a big outage. Cloudflare just had a big outage. So obviously you need to have these in place so we can be more resilient. Once again, anticipate, maintain a state of informed preparedness for adversity, withstand, continuous assurance mission or business function despite adversity, recover, restore the mission or business function during or after an attack, and adapt, modify the mission, function, and or support capabilities in response to a predicted change in the technique. So these are the cyber resilience goals. So you want to anticipate it, withstand the attack, be able to recover from the attack, and be able to adapt from the attack. So there's things we know we're probably gonna have a DDoS attack. We probably know you're gonna have some kind of outage in the cloud. And inside our domain, you can look out there and kind of figure out what's the most known attacks for. If we're a financial company, a government entity, energy company, right? There's known attacks from certain nation states, and then inside they have their technique, right? That they use TTP. So once again, we should be able to withstand an attack, recover from the attack, and be able to adapt and exchange from the attack. It could be we're getting attacked on this particular data center. We could spin over to another data center with different IPs and different URLs, right? That we could use for our high profile company and our high classification data, right? That's just adapting to on the fly with a failover plan. Once again, we're trying to master that resiliency. So you have third, the cyber resiliency objectives. prevent or avoid, prepare, continue, constrain, and reconstitute. Right? Prevent or avoid, preclude the successful execution of attack or realization of adverse condition. All right, we have once again we have WAF, Web Application Firewall. So there's certain attacks we're going to automatically block that are an OWASP top 10. So if it's a script kiddie or somebody's not mature, those low-level attacks, once again, we can prevent or avoid those. Prepare, maintain a set of realistic course of actions that address predicted and anticipated adversity. So everybody knows we run incident response exercises. So part of those exercises to make sure they're realistic and we'll be better prepared to handle that incident. One of the ones I like to use, shout out to Study GRC, we did one their Discord. We did an incident response exercise. One thing I like to do off the bat is people get their laptop stolen with company data and their federal data. So what does that look like? All right, depending on the state, you got police report in to get your insurance to get reimbursed for your laptop. Depending on your data, you got to let your people know I do a lot of IRS work, or I used to do IRS work. So part of the IRS work, if IRS data is on a laptop and it gets stolen, you got to let them know within 24 hours of you knowing. So who do you call? It's called TIGDA. Who do you let them know? Then from your chain, right? The CIO will know, the CISO know, compliance director know. And if it's all the data, maybe the president wants to know, right? So you got to figure that out inside your incident response. Once again, and be prepared for that. Continue. Maximize the duration and visibility of essential mission or business function during adversity. So the part of that I think people miss is we call it BIA, business impact analysis. What business functions are important to your organization? If you do a DR, disaster recovery, you fell over to a different data center or a different organization or a different building, all your business functions are coming, right? So when I worked for a large company, I think they had 200 business functions. We really only DR'd about 15, right? Those have federal requirements, state requirements. Sometimes if that business function wasn't up, we had to refund clients and people money. So that's why you need to rate your business functions so you can figure out what needs to be continued. Constraint, kind of limit the damage from your adversity. And reconstitute, once you get everything figured out, you need to go back to your primary site. So how do you do that? Right? It sounds easy, but long story short, we did a disaster recovery. And when we try to move back to the our primary database, long story short, there's things called primary keys. They were out of order. So when we try to bring them up, keys start running into other keys. And so you need to make sure that reconstitution when you need to spin back up to the main site and what that entails. Let me see, my man Larry's asking a question. We touched on the role of disaster preparation and recovery, or a continuing operation within the Fed Gov being a separate role of responsibility. Is that all on the GRC SME in the private sector? It depends on the maturity of the company. I've seen it on the GRC SME, but a lot of times I usually work for the compliance director. So really GRC, depending on the company, a lot of times it's under the compliance director. Yeah, but a lot of times like the project management, usually I quarterback it, right? I'm doing a DR test, but I need all the IT people on deck, right? Because when we fell over to another database, the DNS has to fill over. That's really not what the GRC, right? But I need to make sure all those set up from a DR, like you said, a business continuity perspective. So the compliance director can run it. IT can run it. Bigger companies, I usually see security runs it or GRC runs it. A lot of companies don't have a GRC organization, so a lot of times it's under security. But no, I think you hit it. You got to have your disaster recovery, your disaster preparedness and recovery, and continuing operation. A lot of times you work in a building. If that building gets hit or something, the power goes out, where does those people go to work? Right. So when I was doing some work for the state of Indiana, we actually went to a whole nother building that was under the state's purview. A lot of times it would be like in a stadium and they just pulling up folding chairs with laptops. But once again, what does that look like? And two, like we talked about, it's not the whole company, right? It's usually the top 10 business functions that people picked or rated that needs to come up inside DR. Let me know if that answers your question, Larry. I was kind of rambling, but yeah, it could be under GRC SME, but a lot of times short, mature companies, I see it's under compliance director. Most private companies don't have a GRC, so I usually see it under security or compliance. Once again, drop your questions in there. Shout out to Larry. That was an excellent question. Let's keep rolling. Just understand, maintain representation of your mission and business dependency and status of resource with respect to adversity. Discussion this objective supports the achievement of all objectives, most notably prepare, reconstruct. Got your CDM in there. Transform, modify the mission or business function supporting process to handle adversity and address environmental changes more effectively. Those environmental changes could be your DNS went out, aka AWS. Re-architect is something not working, you want to make it better. Now we need a better DR site. Maybe we need to move to instead of copying over the database files to pull them off backup, maybe we need multi-availability databases, so they automatically copying over there so they come up quickly. Maybe we need to have two hot sites that's automatically syncing their data between two different regions. But remember, each one of those costs money, right? So the quicker your RPO, meaning you don't lose data, usually the more it costs, right? So if you're just taking a backup checkpoint, moving it to a different region, then you gotta bring up a database, restyle the backup, right? That could be, depending on how big of the database, I've seen it take 12 hours to bring up a petabyte database. But if I'm syncing, right, between two availability zones, all right, then I could just take the standby, make it the primary and keep pushing, right? But now I'm syncing it up. I got extra data traffic, but once again, that could spin up as quick as 30 minutes, right? So then too hot. But once again, those will come by when you talk about the classification of data, interviewing people, and they're going to tell you what the RTO, return to operations, and RPO, point operations, how much data you want to lose. And that's going to let you know what you need to transform, or if you need to re-architect your setup, meaning your database wouldn't be able to come up within 30 minutes with your current design. So you have to work with the CTO to figure out what that new architecture looks like. Here's just some of the high level functionalities that are in cyber resilience. At the top, we're just going to kind of hit them at the top real quick. Adaptive response. We'll hit the top one. Dynamic reconfiguration. Analytics monitoring the damage assessments. Coordinate protection. Consistency of analysis. Contextual awareness. Deception, obfuscation, and tainting. Diversity, architectural diversity, design diversity, and synthetic diversity. A lot of times what that means, a lot of people don't do that type of diversity. What that means, one router would be Cisco and the other router would be Palo Alto. The problem with that is I need people with both of those skill sets that's going to cost money. That's never going to happen. That type of diversity is never going to happen. One database is Oracle and the other day is SQL Server. Those type of talents and SMEs cost money. So you don't really see diversity like that from a resilience standpoint, right? Because if a bad guy attacks you, one router, he might, have the findings because it's a Cisco. But when he moved to the other router, if it was Juniper or something else, right, those attacks wouldn't work. But once again, I've never seen diversity in real life. Dynamic positioning, non-persistence, privilege restriction, realignment, redundancy, segmentation, substantiated integrity, and unpredictability. Right. So a lot of things that I see inside that. We had a couple of those. Um, Segmentation, right? That's out of zero trust. You're gonna do micro segmentation. You're gonna worry about your session, worry about the health of your device, worry about the location of your device, right? So all that's part of realignment and privilege escalation, right? So a lot of that really zero trust, zero trust is handling most of that in those particular settings. And we probably do another video because each one of those you can really drill down and go in depth. So we probably set that up in another video because, to be honest, most of that's really going to be on the CTO on how they're going to architect their environment. You as a GRC person is going to validate it does what it's set up to do, like microsegmentation. If I do a scan, I should only see certain subnets, right? If I'm scanning outside and I scan from a web app, I should be able to see your database scanning from the outside of the internet, right? So that's me validating your segmentation. Analytic monitoring, a lot of that's coming from your SIM and your logging. Are you logging what's appropriate in there? Once again, we're going to talk a little bit about MITRE. I could trace in your logs and kind of figure out, are there some nation states attacking on our network? Because I'm following them inside our logs, right? So, once again, that's the analytic and monitoring part of that. We always know we got to tailor it. If you see at the top, tailorable processes for cyber resilience. So tailored is each company's has unique settings to that. Each company's a finance company, a government, so you need to tailor it for resiliency for that particular subject domain. So a lot of times we talk about domain knowledge. Okay, there's an IT domain knowledge, and there's a business domain knowledge. Then shout out Larry, there's a government domain knowledge, right? Government's its own beast, right? So making sure once again you have resiliency in each one of those domains from a business perspective. Once again, have RTO, RPO, who you need to notify if stuff goes down. All right. So once again, that's brought on by the federal agency that's over that particular classification of data. So once again, talking about tailoring, understand the context. How does the stakeholder concern and priorities translate in cyber resiliency? There's some of the tasks over there. Identify the programmatic context, architectural context, operational context, and the threat context. Establish the initial cyber resiliency baseline. How will the system doing meet stakeholder needs and address the stakeholders' concern? Identify existing capabilities, identify gaps and issues, define evaluation criteria, and make initial assessment. So a lot of times, let's talk about those gaps and issues. What compliance are you using? Are you an IRS compliance? Are you a STIG compliance? Those will let you know you can do scans of your technical infrastructure, and it tell you if you don't have the proper encryption, you don't have the proper DR, you don't have the proper FIPS 140-3 endpoints, right? If you don't have them, those are gaps and issues. You need to figure out how you're going to handle it. Analyze the systems. Business or operational risk. We were talking about that earlier. Depending on if you're IRS, Gov, FedRAMP, CMMC, pharmaceuticals, right? Pharmaceutical would be the business operation, right? Pharmaceuticals a lot of times gets paid from the government, so they will have HIPAA and high trust compliance on there, right? So those are your requirements, business, operational, technical. Then that's going to let you figure out what your gaps are. Define specific alternatives. How can missions or operational resilience be improved by improving cyber resilience? Define the potential technical or procedure solutions. Supporting system process. Analyze potential solutions with respect to the criteria. Right. Once again, the criteria would be we're IRS shop. We use schism scans. We use an Oracle database. So these are the requirements for that particular database. And if we can't do it, once again, that will be a finding. Then the mitigating control will be, what do we do if we can't actually harden it the way it was recommended? Develop recommendation, recommending plan of action, which is a poem. Identify and analyze alternatives, access alternatives, recommends a plan of action. A lot of times, though, that's not you. That's you working with the development teams. Okay, you did this. We can't do that because we're in violation of federal data. What is our alternative? How much is going to cost us and how long is it going to take? Right then, shout out to Larry. We would get that to the PMO. So Larry would do the the dependencies of that project plan of what that look like. Right, what do we need? How much is going to cost and how long it's going to take? And if that's too long, what alternative can the business do? Can we pick another language? Can we pick another database? Can we use a different SaaS services until we get ours built that can meet those requirements, right? But those are alternatives. You got to work with the business, the current IT infrastructure, really the development team lead of what that would look like. Strategy for reducing your attack surface. And right there, you see it, all those referencing my favorite special publication 815, reduce the extent of the attack surface, attack surface reduction, implementing the concept of layered defense, principle of least privileges, deprecating unsafe functions. Once again, though, that's part of zero trust a lot. Right? You see related techniques, coordinate protection, privilege restriction, and realignment. We were looking at some of those in the last slide. Reduce the exposure of structural accessibility or attack surface. Implementing concepts of layered defense, applying principles of least privilege. And once again, at the bottom, reduce the temporal accessibility. Implement a non-persistent component. Service mitigating risk from adversary persistent threats, your APT. Reducing the target's capabilities. Window opportunity and availability of attack surface. One thing I see listing that I don't really see is just-in-time security. Meaning I'm a DBA, but I'm not doing DBA work all the time. I'm using my regular account. But when I need to do work in a database, create some disks, expand the database, create tables, create indexes, I need to do that for 3 hours. So I'm going to go reach out and say, I need the privileges of a DBA for 3 hours. Once they give me for 3 hours, I do my work. Once I'm done, I check them back in. Those privileges get taken. So if APT actually takes over my account, figures out my password, I'm not a DBA at the moment. So he would just get my regular low-level privileges, right? So I see JIT, just in time, from a security perspective. I think I've only seen one company actually implement that correctly or actually even try to do it. But I think that's one thing with the cloud vendors. They kind of set it up because you can assume a role, and that role will be DBA or developer, and that role will have your privileges. So I'm starting to see it a little more. So I think that's when they talk about temporal accessibility, right? Temporary privileges. I like this from MITRE. Shout out to Todd. This is really for the red team people. So what is that, right? So MITRE is how nation states attack. You see at the top on the left, active, once again, the attack technique, active scanner, the mitigation we were talking about, perceive deceptive information, passive decoy. We talked about honeypots and all that, right? So PBL's against honeypot, but that's a different conversation. Conceal resources for discovery, inspect and analyze network traffic. Once again, your cyber resiliency approach, your potential effect, and what controls inside NIST 800 will help you with those. Right? A lot of times we talk about controls, but when the rubber hits the road, this is the mitigations for those attacked from a nation state. And they go through a lot of them, right? I just cut off one page, but you as a GRC person will look through these and say, for my industry, financial or government, for my tech stack, which techniques are most likely to happen? And when we pick out maybe the top 10 for our industry, we would pick these mitigations set up to help thwart those type of attacks from a nation state. Right. And we would document these in our SSPs and in our policies and procedures. So when our auditors come through and talk about threat models and plans and techniques, these are the documents we would show them and say, this is what we implemented. This is our test. These are the modules where we're using, and we'll look at a couple of AWS modules. These are the modules we put in place to help us thwart those type of attacks, right? Making us a mature, more cyber resilient organization. Once again, I always like the control number from NIST. That's the control name of it. So here, which is AC26, account management and dynamic privileges. Then from the resiliency technique, right, privilege restriction and adaptive response. So once again, these are the NIST controls. From a cyber resilience, this is what we're putting in effect for those particular controls. And we in the slides coming up, we actually name a couple of those AWS controls that fits these NIST controls, right? These are the NIST controls, and these are what we're doing AWS services so we can be cyber resilient. Once again, some more. And here's let's go to walk through it at the top. You anticipate. Remember, we were looking at the anticipate, recover. So once again, the threat awareness, attack services. We were looking at supply chain dependency analysis. These are the AWS services we will use for those particular issues over there, right? Guard Duty Security Hub, IAM Access Analyzer, Config, Macy, right? So a lot of times it's like, well, this is our cyber resiliency. What will we use in AWS? These are the services we were using there. Early warning telemetry. We use CloudTrail, VPC logs, and CloudWatch logs. Right, those are all really internal logging from AWS. So we got to log in. We got to log that traffic so we can figure out what's going early. So once again, we can warn our tech team that something looks suspicious. Modeling and simulation, resilience hubs, file injector simulations. I've never used those last two. I need to look those up. So a lot of times I look these up, and that's how I learned from a GRC perspective and cybersecurity perspective of what things should we put in place to help us with security. Like 95, 98% of those I know, just looking at them. A couple of these I've never seen before. So, of course, I'm going to dig into them deeper later on, right? Because I probably did 50 AWS services. And that's how I learned the services, doing videos and labbing about them. So, once again, I haven't done Resiliency Hub or File Injector Simulator for modeling, I guess, attacks from third-party assessments, right, or threat modeling. Withstand, right? We getting attacked, so how do we withstand it? So we talked about segmentation. Once again, that's going to be part of your zero trust, VPT, subnet, NACLs, and security groups. Basically, firewall concepts inside AWS. Diversity and redundancy. Got multiple availability zones, multiple regions. We could fall into multiple regions. Load and redistribution. Application load balancer, network load balancer. Route 53, once you get your DNS names, you can fill over to different regions. Privilege containment, IMCPs, leg formation, zero trust IM, DDoS and edge protection, shield advance. We talked a little bit about a WAF and CloudFront, data integrity safeguard. But once again, those are the cyber resiliency, and these are the services we need to get comfortable. And don't get me wrong, Azure has their version of that. Google has those versions of those equivalents. So I wouldn't let the AWS part confuse you. Once again, most big vendors, public cloud vendors, have the same type of services. So depending on your cloud of choice, you would just kind of figure out what services work best for you. In a recovery standpoint, rapid restoration, we was talking about RDS snapshots, EBS snapshots, backups, AMI, container images, Route 53 failover attacks, automated rebuild step functions, Lambda orchestration, code dependencies, code deploy, evidence retention, S3 Glacier Vault Lock, and Cloud Trail Lake. So if you got stuff that from an IRS you need to keep 7 years and can never be changed, you would actually put in the S3 bucket, which is basically their object file, and you just lock it and says nobody can touch it for 7 years, right? So when the auditors come, you're like, it's a lock on it, so we know it hasn't changed. And if it changed, you will see it in the log. But once again, just different cyber resiliency things you need in different AWS services. So what I try to do sometimes is I know the services. So sometimes I work with the CTO. I'm like, well, did you look at this particular service? All right. I don't tell them how to do them. I'll be like, well, this is kind of what GRC would like to see because it enables cyber resilience or FedRAMP requirement or NIST requirement or FISMA requirement. Those government requirements advise you to use certain services, right? So we have to get comfortable with those services. So when we review them, we know what we're looking at. That's one reason I was doing a lot of third-party assessments inside AWS, and I didn't know the services. So I'm like, well, I think this is okay, right? So as you become more comfortable with the services from GRC, then you can push back like this does not meet the NIST requirement. This does not meet the cyber resilience compliance from a government perspective. So what's your mitigating control? I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. Like I said, just kind of wrapping it up. Let's see. Once again, from the adapt phase, you can see them on the left. Once again, from the resiliency standpoint. Then once again, your AWS services. One thing I was that I haven't seen, they say Guard Duty plus the MITRE mapping dashboard. So that's 342. So that's something I want to look up, right? So the MITRE shows you the nation state techniques and processes of how they attack. Guard Duty is AWS service for vulnerabilities and those type of attack. I didn't know there was a built-in MITRE dashboard, so that's something I'll probably look up this weekend and just kind of see what that looks like in practice. Architecture, trust. I dropped the link in PDL was not scared. Drop in the chat. Everybody, hopefully, 25. Everybody, down 26. Let's see, I think I just showed another term. So all the stuff looking at, I protect diagram where you would configure the type of settings in that. Oh, 100%. Splunk is definitely used. When we talk about let's see. Yeah, Splunk is definitely in the mix. I just was looking at the right there where you say early warning to telemetry. I'm messing up. CloudTrail, VPC log, and CloudWatch. Those are the local things from AWS. Usually we push them to a SIEM. That SIEM will be Splunk. All the big companies I work for, because these you could keep probably a year or 2 years at the most, but a lot of times the IRS wants 7. So we're going to push those to the SIEM to help us with our early warning. Splunk definitely is a big dog. The only problem with Splunk, and I've seen people sell their license, is super expensive because you buy it, but then it charges you for the volume of packets that goes into Splunk. So I think that's BS. So But now Splunk, the big guys use Splunk because they're going to give you a lot of those early warning dashboards. It automatically, once you push all your logs to it, it can help you trace a packet when it first enter your organization. So it might go through the state network. It might go through your cloud network. It might go back to your prem to a database. Splunk's going to track all those packets. It's going to help you trace that particular transaction through your whole organization. Now, Splunk's the big dog. It's just too expensive, but Splunk, Lcache, Log Analytics out of Azure, Sentinel out of Azure. There's probably 4 or 5 of the big dogs in there, but now Splunk is definitely in there. Once again, Splunk is just a little pricey, but once again, I think that's the choice of the Fortune 500 and the big government agencies use Splunk. So I guess I didn't show logging down here either. Oh yeah, if you look at the top, you see your CloudTrail and your application logs. So it will go in there. Then usually we have a connector. So automatically once you go on CloudTrail, it'll push it to Splunk. So a lot of times too is once we get it locally, we don't want to keep it on a local device, because if a hacker gets to the local device, it can delete the log, so you wouldn't be able to track him. So once again, once it logs on a local device after a certain amount of time, it could be minutes or a day, we'll push it to the SIM. So even if the hacker hacks our local device, they won't have access to the SIM. Or once again, it's another layer of technique that we have to figure out how to hack the SIM. Let me know if that answers your question, Ty. But I think that's all I had. Once again, I dropped the link. If you had any other questions, just drop them in the chat. I just want to do the 160. Once again, the ability to anticipate, withstand, recover from, adapt to an adverse condition, stress attack, or compromise on the system that can be applied to a variety of entities, right? So once again, if you're attacked or DDoS, or what's your resiliency to be able to withstand that attack, and what's your resiliency to be able to spin up and roll back from that particular attack. And a lot of times we say attack, but AWS DNS going out, right? That's not an attack, but that's an event we got to be able to handle in our cyber resiliency of our system, right? And a lot of people didn't seem like they were set up properly to handle that AWS out, or the cloud front one just happened too. So once again, I'll hang out a little longer. Put any questions in the chat. Cybersecurity. Once again, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Oh man, my fault. Just tired. Feel like it's been a long year. Been a long year for PBO. Let's see. Once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. Shout out to Ty. Shout out to Larry. Shout out to Misty, Brian, Regine, Aiken, Jeffrey Johnson, Brian, CL3894. Shout out to my man, Mr. Whitlock. I'm going to text you tomorrow. If you're free, let me know. I know you're busy. Shout out to the fam. Ferry Perry, let me know. Good luck on your career. I always work for a private company doing federal type work, so I can't complain. And I was just thinking about that. Not been too bad for me. Not been too bad for me. I appreciate you, Larry. I appreciate you. Just trying to do my thing. And two is these special publications, when you're doing your ATO authority operate, this is the stuff you need to have in your documentation. You're gonna have policies and procedures. Then part of that, when you have your system security plan, is how you're doing resiliency. right? So that's why I do these special publications, because inside your ATOs or your documentation for an assessment, um, these are the things they're going to be looking for. So shout out to NIST. They give you a framework for what they're looking for and how they want you to do it. And once again, the questions you need to be asking your organization. Here, let me pull up that one I really liked. It was here. Which shout out to Chris. He really does that. What's your risk management strategy? Going through your goals, going through your objectives, talking about your strategic design, your structural design. We're talking from a structural, right? That will be your Splunk. That will be your CloudWatch. That will be, are you using serverless? Are you using Unix or Windows? Are you using containers? Kubernetes or Docker, right? And what techniques are you using when you pick those approach, right? So when your auditor comes in, not at first, but probably your second, third, those are the things they're going to be looking for from a mature organization. So that's it. So once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. Let's see. Thanksgiving, are you cooking? Are you cooking for things? No, no, no. I don't cook. Shout out to my son, man. I got a lot of grandkids. Usually I just chip in on him, and he's an excellent cook. So he's smoking a turkey and a ham. PBL gonna come out, kiss the grandkids, send out a couple cash apps, and go back home. Now you right, that's a young man's game. I let him handle that. He's an excellent chef, but I let my son do that. I appreciate you, Jeffrey Johnson. Thanksgiving to everyone. I probably do Friday at noon. If you not busy, drop on in. But if you're doing a Thanksgiving, just check out the replay. You always know if you got a question, just put them on the video. I'll get to them. If not, Larry can find me. A lot of people can find me. Chris can find me. Yeah, that's it, man. I have no desire. I appreciate you, Aki. I'm out. Everybody have